This meeting is being recorded.
I want to welcome you all to the Monstrousitous Minute, Episode 3. I have a former Green Beret, constitutional lawyer, Ivan Raiklin, on today, and we're going to talk all things physical training, ultra marathons, and entry into the Green Berets and what that kind of looked like. So, Ivan, happy to have you on here and excited to talk training today.
Yeah, no, it's good to be on, Jeff.
So talk to me a little bit about your background prior to getting into the military service. Like, what did you grow up playing sports? I mean, what did that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, as far as the physical component, I'm glad we're doing this interview because I don't think I've done an interview that talks about the physical nature that is required to have mental acuity. I think it goes hand in hand. In order to have that sharp mind, you have to have a sharp body, and the way you do that is through, diet, sleep, regimen, and then exercise. So, as far as exercise component of everything, I started off, playing a lot outside because we didn't really have much. So that was the first component. And then as we moved into, I think, junior high and high school, I lived in Iowa. So wrestling is a big sport in Iowa. And that's really, I think, where I got some of my physical discipline in being able to kind of perform at a more, I guess, above amateur level, if you will.
I got you. So where did you grow up in Iowa at? I'm from Illinois originally. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, Cedar Falls, Iowa. So Pete Junior High,
Okay.
Cedar Falls High School. We were a 4A school, whatever the bigger, I can't even remember, AAA, quadruple A school. And,
Okay.
we had a pretty decent program. We had a good wrestling coach, and we had a really deep bench in terms of a competition on the team. I think we're pretty highly rated within the state as a team.
So Dan Gable is a absolute state treasure. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Iowa City definitely was a rivalry between Cedar Falls
Okay.
and Iowa City. About an hour, hour and 15-minute drive from each other. He later became obviously coach of University of Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up I should have pursued it. I could have probably walked on to Northern Iowa potentially, but I decided not to. Kind of finished up in high school. But having said that, after high school, because the discipline of wrestling, a lot of people don't understand is when you very competitive team and you're trying to vie for position on varsity or to be one of the members in a very competitive environment, you have to make weight. So the component is not only, especially the mid and lower weights, obviously heavyweight, you don't really have to worry too much about your weight, but you have to have the discipline to be able to cut. For example, in my situation, my normal weight in high school was around, especially freshman, sophomore year, was about 125, 130, but you'd have to drop down to 112. And that's coming from somebody that already is at 4% body fat. So you're basically, over the course of 3 days, you're trying to drop 12 pounds, which is essentially 10% of your body mass over the course of 3 days. So,
and that's before the days of hydration testing too, which, that changed the kind of the game and what you could do weight class wise with wrestling. But I mean, that's a completely different story now as compared to where things used to be when you were growing up, though.
yeah. So I remember as we go into weigh-in, I would do things such as, and this is, a lot of folks in the lighter weight class, to get down to the lowest weight, you'd exercise in sweats and then plastics, so that you're basically draining your entire water, as much water out of your body as you can. And you're spitting, some guys even took laxatives. I didn't go that far, but you're trying to drop as much weight as possible. You weigh in and then you start to slowly recover, because the weigh-in was usually the day prior. But if you're in a tournament, you're doing the weigh-in the day of, so it's kind of exhausting. Or the day after, I should say, that you normally do, and they give you like a 1 pound allowance, which isn't much, because let's face it, 16-ounce water is a pound, right?
Yeah,
So
that's pretty
not
wild.
only are you exercising, you're doing 2-3 hours of physical workout. You're trying to do 2-a-days in the morning and the afternoon. You're trying to keep mental acuity, so you're going to school, but at the same time, you're even sleeping in sweats and plastics, so that, and by the way, you're not eating, but you're also trying to drink a little bit of water so that the metabolism continues internally within your body, but you don't want to do too much because that's adding too much weight. So you're trying to balance all that. Remember, 4% body fat. You're trying to drop 12 pounds in the course of essentially 72 hours. And you're trying to figure out every single mechanism you can in order to expedite that process. And so that it requires a lot of mental discipline, right? Because
Absolutely.
most people, you know, in today's society, you're hungry, you eat. You know, at least in America, right? A lot of places throughout the world, that may not be the case, but
Yeah, America's the one
it's
place
tough.
where in the world where you don't really feel hungry. Like people don't actually know what it feels like to be starving because there's always
Right.
something
So
available. You know what I mean?
it's that mental, it's the physical, physiological, mental resilience that you need to have that I think in a lot of sports you just don't. And so obviously technique and it's essentially hand to hand, uh, you know, it's essentially trying to make as efficient as possible the mass that you have as a human to be able to submit the other person to bend to
Yep.
your will. And that's what wrestling is. And a lot of it has to do with the training, you know, and then that mental component that I just kind of drilled down on specifically. So that was the
Absolutely.
sport. That was my
As a
sport.
strength coach, my first job was I was the director of boxing up at the United States Olympic Education Center in Michigan, and I had all my guys were top 10 in the U.S. They all were pretty legit guys, but I also helped out with the Greco program up there. And they had a guy named Spencer Mango on there, and I've talked about him on a couple of these podcasts. But talking about a guy pound for pound, he's about 130 some odd pounds, but he could Zercher squat, but it means holding the bar in the crooks of his arms, 365 pounds. I mean, it's an unreal ability to do that, but at the same time, flip a switch, make weight, go into international competition and kick ass. So it's a really cool thing that the wrestlers are able to do, and it's probably why they're my preferred group to actually work with.
No, it's fantastic. Boxing is very similar. So, but you know, boxing obviously, depending on how much you do and how bad you get hurt,
Mm-hmm.
there's not as much damage done in wrestling to the human
Yep.
brain as TBI coming from boxing. And I wanted to, well, since we're talking on this subject, I really want people to listen in on this and contextualize it and looking at Congressman Jim Jordan. So Congressman Jim Jordan was a college athlete, college wrestler. And, you know, all the left and radicals are laughing at him. They call him names. But let's face it. I think if I'm not mistaken, he was either undefeated or maybe lost one match. I mean, that's the
It's
highest
unreal.
level that you can get. And so contextualizing with what I just said, the reason why Jim Jordan is the way he is mentally in terms of toughness when people are attacking him, you're not going to get to people like him or some of
Yep.
us that have gone through grueling physical. And it's the mental component. We're
Mm-hmm.
not going to bend based on noises that you make. It's irrelevant.
Yep.
If
I
anything,
would agree.
you're only going to motivate us to crush you intellectually. And if you give us an opportunity, like I basically called out Governor Sununu in New Hampshire in my recent tweets, I'm pleading with him to go ahead and bully me instead of him bullying women and children that attend his executive council meetings by denying them their First Amendment. I would like to see him bully me in the ring, whether it's the
Yep.
octagon for a charity event, whether it's boxing or even wrestling. And you know what? Now that he hasn't responded over the last couple of days, I'm seriously considering because I'm calling on him to do this event on July 17th when I'm up in Wisconsin for another event.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be speaking about and exposing more of the corruption in New Hampshire, particularly as it applies to him and some of the national actors. But I would love to do that event that day, and I'm seriously considering handicapping myself to make it even more appealing to him. And we already have somebody that's committed 50K for the charity of whoever the winner's choice is, because we have
It's
limited
awesome.
ability to push back. This is kind of a tangent. We have a limited ability to push back
Yep.
against the lawlessness and corruption in our government. I just think it'll be morale boosting for patriots throughout the country and just morale boosting in general, as well as therapeutic
Mm-hmm.
to see, you know, for those that don't like me, well, maybe he will land a few and they'll be happy to go ahead and amplify that. But let's just face it. I think many out there that want to stop government corruption, at least this will help in that process of being therapeutic. If I'm going to avoid expletives here, let's just say neutralizing Governor Sununu in a sanctioned, friendly
Yeah.
manner that a lot of people would like to see. and obviously benefiting charity as part of it. It's got kind of similar to what we're seeing potentially playing out with Zuckerberg and
Yeah, that's been an
Elon
interesting
Musk.
thing to follow. It's been interesting to follow. I see George St. Pierre has jumped in, and so I
Oh
think it's
yeah,
just I think it's
a lot
awesome.
of people said earlier like I looked like John St. Pierre. I'm like, I don't know, I don't see any resemblance, but whatever.
I think it's the head. It's the head. Um, so can I zig before we kind of go off on the special operations type of part? But I'd like to just ask you: is it a weakness of character that we have, or is it a corruption problem that we have in this country? Because that seems to be the argument. We have weak men, or we have corrupt men. Is it an either
Yes.
or is it a combination of both?
I mean, you know the answer. I think it's rhetorical, but I will stress it this way: the answer is yes, and the answer is both.
Okay.
Uh, how do I extrapolate this? So, and I think they go hand in hand.
Yep.
When you are of weak character and weak mind, you're not willing to accept responsibility. You're trying to
Mm-hmm.
blame others for, failures that you have done. It's always about, oh, it's this person's fault. It's the man's fault. It's this and that, rather than looking in the mirror and saying, like, I always say this, the reason why we're in such a situation right now as a country is because people like you and me, we didn't get involved earlier and more aggressively than
Yeah.
we did. So it's my
Yeah.
fault. It's literally my fault because one person can have massive impact. And had I been doing things like what I'm doing right now in Congress and just confronting folks, I mean, that's a level of pressure escalation that's lawful, that's in your face. I mean, I'm still not doing as much as what I could. I literally could be going to every single school board meeting in the
Mm-hmm.
whatever 100, 200-mile vicinity of where I'm located and literally
Mm-hmm.
calling every single one of these scumbags out, one in person, to make them squirm, to reconsider where their stance is ideologically. Number two, I could do the same thing across all political parties, whether it's Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Green Party, and literally going to their events and saying, hey,
Yep.
this is how it should be. And by just being part of that conversation, some people are going to, when you leadership is not a title, it's action. People
Yep.
consider you a
Yes.
leader based on the action that you conduct that is more action than anybody else. Now I get it. All you need to do is this much more than others. But if you're acting that much more than a massive amount of people, you are automatically considered a leader. And if you do it consistently, that's when you can effectuate change. And if you don't bend on your moral, legal, ethical principles, then guess what?
Mm-hmm.
You're automatically de facto leader, and people are going to start following it in and supporting that because it's pretty clear. I think even with this mentally mutilated society from the CCP coerced and manipulated FBI that downstream corrupts our conversation through their censorship scheme on mainstream media and big tech, most people know what reality is. And the reason
Mm-hmm.
why we're in the position that we're in is because everyone cowered. Luckily, we had
Yep.
enough. I was on this previous podcast just before coming on this one. We were this close to essentially having our country collapse. Now we're not in a good position right now, but we're in a
Mm-hmm.
much better position right now in terms of constitutional order with a new House of Representatives. I know you wanted to talk about the speaker stuff. We have a House of Representatives that can constitutionally create not the body check that I want and the speed that I want,
Yep.
but it is there to be able to. We're now past being a speed bump. We're now in a position where we're going to essentially force these guys into impeachment's not enough, but at least we're moving in the
Yep.
direction of exposing these corrupt actors where they know that we know that they know that we know. Whereas before, only some of us knew and were called nut job tinfoil
Mm-hmm.
conspiracy theorists. Well, fast forward to today, after about a year and a half, 2 years, now we're 93 and 0 in our conspiracies. And so now you're
Yep.
seeing so many more podcasts. I mean, I only do podcasts that I only talk about content that is banned from CommiTube, that is not able to reside
Mm-hmm.
on Facebook, on Instagram
Yep.
by design. Because guess what? I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but at the same time, name one other person out there with a quarter of a century in our military special ops intelligence at significant levels, as well as a constitutional attorney that can contextualize in a manner that's pretty rational, connecting the dots that no one else is doing. And I'm not the only one. A lot of these other truth tellers. Well, guess what? More and more people are going to move off of CommieTube, off of Facebook, off of Washington Compost, New York Slimes, Roytards, raw sewage, right? And guess what? Now we start to red pill more and more. I know a lot of people are out there like, well, I'm going to play in their backyard. I'm like, no. I'm not. They're going to bend to my will, and they're going to compromise to my 100%. If not, then they can continue to mutilate themselves and go ahead and extinct themselves on their own. If they want an opportunity at this point of the game to learn about what's going on, then please, by all means, I welcome you. So that's kind of my stance. And I went on a tangent, and I went on my little Raiklin.
I love it, but it's brutal honesty, and we need brutal honesty. People that say what they mean and mean what they say, and it's
because I've
time
been
that happens.
10 times, 11 times across all branches of government, pretty much, whether it be I almost guarantee they did a FIS on me. Obviously, the J6 cover-up committee looked into me. They asked about 15 people about me, from your General Flynn, Sidney Powell, Patrick Byrne, Rudy Giuliani, to Ivanka, Kushner. But I don't know why, but they were too scared to come and call me in, because as soon as they called me out during the third hearing, I said, hey, I'm right here. I'm 15 minutes away from you calling me into the office. But I'm telling you this, if you want me to come in and testify under these conditions, you bring in Nancy Pelosi, her daughter, her son-in-law, John Sullivan, Ray Epps, the DC mayor, the DC Metro Police Chief, the U.S. Capitol Police Chief, the acting police chief later on, Yogananda Pittman, the current police chief, Thomas Manger, the House Sergeant at Arms, Senate Sergeant at Arms, the RNC Security Chief, the DNC Security Chief, and the list goes on, to the point where they know exactly why I need to call those people in, because I'm going to expose their involvement in a Fedsurrection, a coup d'etat committed by the Article 1 branch of government. And Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell need to be in the room. As soon as I did that, they kind of like back off, and they try to figure out how to entrap me. But homie, don't play that.
Yeah. Being a citizen of the state of Kentucky, the great state of Kentucky, the Commonwealth, I cannot stand
By the way,
Mitch McConnell. I don't know a single person that even likes him. You say what?
No, you're saying nobody likes that guy? Yeah. I mean, you got a couple of decent ones. You got Rand Paul. McConnell's definitely a total scumbag, China first Republican. And then you have Tom Massey, which he's on weaponization on some issues. I agree with him, but he's definitely too weak on the whole censure and castration of Adam Schiff, which I don't agree with that. We should have castrated Adam Schiff.
Yeah. I'm in his district, and I've seriously just get on the stage and ask him why the hell he bended. And knowing I'm not going to win, but why did you bend? Because I wouldn't have bended. I would, this guy is tangled up in all sorts of shit. His entanglement with, pedophiles in California, Standard Hotel. I mean, it's really a disgusting thing that Schiff is all bound up into. But what can you prove aside from when you've got, government agencies that don't investigate anything?
Right. It's up to us to investigate, and I think we're doing that. And essentially, we're gonna carry the rest of our constitutional institutions and actors. Again, if they're not going to do it, we're going to do it. That's what leaders do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If we're looking to our left and right, and we're like, hey, you're supposed to do this, and if you are, I'm going to help you. If you're not, guess what? Get out of the way. Move.
Yeah.
As a famous
can I ask you a strategic question?
Ludacris once said, "Move." Get out.
He's a great philosopher. Can I ask you a strategic question?
Sure.
So I'm from Illinois, in Pike County, Illinois. It's one of the deer hunting capitals of the world. It's an absolutely beautiful place. I love it. But the state of Illinois is as far as I can see, it's unrecoverable at this point. So I've talked to my best friend is the mayor of my hometown where I grew up. I know guys that are in the town councils, but also county commissioners. Point blank told them that you need to tell them you're going to withhold all state and local and federal taxes And if you don't like it, come in and send the National Guard in and barricade us down and create a national story out of it, because you're no longer represented. There's nobody there that shares your values in the state house or federally anymore that represents the state. Is that kind of the wrong approach to say, why don't you just show us the force that you're willing to show us? Or am I kind of off base there?
I mean, that is a technique. Remember, if you look at the history of humanity, there have been different techniques to accomplish different things, right? The entire spectrum. Yeah. I think that the best idea that I'm coming up with right now is we have to have the mindset of taking over both political parties. Both the two major political parties represent about 99.9% of political power in this country. So if they want to play the China first uniparty game, it's time for the America first uniparty game. Meaning, if you're in a majority blue district and you're like, oh, I'm going to throw my hands up, why don't you just take over the Democrat Party with our values?
Yep.
Just take it over.
Yep.
County by county. If you're in a red district, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to take over the China first Republicans with America first values. That's the mindset. I get it's unconventional, but guess what? We've gotten to that point where we have to just essentially be there, part of the, because if you're not part of the conversation, we're just going to keep losing. Well, if the power structure is the Democrat Party in the jurisdiction that you're in, that's where you need to be. What are they going to physically stop you from attending their meeting? Well, try that. Let's next time bring in 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, and you document the whole process. Because as part of that process, you're exposing the mental midget neophyte IQ of most of these folks. They don't have a rational response when you go in there and they start calling you names. Guess what? Please call me names.
Yep, you've already won.
And then when they call you a name, you tell them, my definition of what you just called me is the following: a person that destroys a libtard in an argument. And since that is my definition of what you just called me, I'm being very successful at that based on what you're calling me. Thank you. I find that as a compliment. Now that we've addressed that and we agree that I'm what you called me, and you agree to my definition of that, let me continue to explain to you how things should be in this country, in this community, etc. Because guess what? I'm in this community and these are my values and you don't represent those values. And now you need to put them on defense. Shame, pain, fear, based on rational thought. People need to get stopped. Like, oh, I'm going to get canceled. Guess what? We're all canceled. Now it's time to reclaim this country, county by county.
Yeah. I love that, man. I love it. We kind of
think about it. Even if the machines are still in play, the selection machines, if your candidate that represents your values is the Democrat and Republican, it's like, oh, sweet. I'm either going to go for, my number 1 draft pick or my number 2 draft pick. And both of them are going to be exactly what needs to be in to represent me. One happens to have a D, one happens to have an R by their name, but knowing full well that these are America First D and America First R's. What? The machine's going to defecate out a third candidate that's not even running? That's going to be a little harder stretch for the AI bots to create, right? Now, like, everybody's like, okay, now I agree with you. All the election fraud deniers are going to be like, oh, consider yourself 94-0 in your conspiracy theories now.
So I'm a high school teacher. So I'm a special ed teacher. I was the behavior guy last year. So I dealt with a lot of kids that just hate school. Now they're moving me to algebra. But I sat in a lot of classrooms last year and a lot of history classes. And when they go through the whole process of explaining what the government is set up like, to me, it's an entirely backward situation. It's literally from township to county to state, then to federal. It's not from federal as Leviathan up to the top, and then you got many Leviathan in your state. It's not like that at all. Because a lot of people, even with this in the state of Kentucky, it varies wildly from county to county. It's where you're at and where the values are. But everybody still wants to have a good paying job. Everybody wants to make sure their kids are safe at school. There's no differences there whatsoever.
Right.
So
you got to ask people.
It's a backwardation in the teaching process.
whether it's a Democrat or Republican event, you're like, hey, do you really want to pay 10% for the big guy so that he can go ahead and put
Mhm.
cocaine in his son and smoke,
Right.
smoke crack, and like no one wants to give 10% for the big guy so that he can spend it on just destroying our country, right?
Yeah, it's a sad
Unfortunately,
thing.
the FBI was providing cover for the last couple of years by censoring and curating and manipulating the content. We need to get people off of Faux News, Commie News
Yep.
Network, MSDNC, all of it, all the corporate media. And I'm glad you're launching your own podcast. So hopefully, even if you get 10, 20 views, that's 10, 20 people that were just educated. And we're going to still
Yep.
slowly claw this thing back. And I think we're more quickly doing that because we're creating different networks. We're creating an infrastructure that's able to
Don't.
counter the lies.
I would agree. I think that I had a family reunion this past weekend. I got family from all over the country that came down to this, and not a single one of them had a pessimistic view on the outlook of the country in the future. They all know we're up shit creek right now, but they're all like, you know what, this is going to self-correct. We're gonna correct this. There wasn't a single person that didn't have that view, even though they're all like, what the fuck is going on here?
Mm-hmm. Now,
But
so
it's nice that we don't have a black pill view of what the country is going to be like. There's an actual positive outlook, and
no, I'm
we can
always going to
change
be on the positive side of
the
things.
trajectory of the country anytime we want.
They're never going to psychologically defeat me. It's going to be attempted and it's going to boomerang, and we're going to devour them. All right, so I don't want to go too long. You said you want to talk about selection and whatnot. Maybe we can close out with that.
Yeah, man. So what's that look like? How did you get in the military? Were you out of high school? Did you go to college first? I mean, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I finished high school. I went to the University of Northern Iowa for college, and then I signed up for what's called the
My
simultaneous
man.
membership program, where you're in the National Guard and you go to basic training, and then you become a cadet. So
Mm-hmm.
what that looked like was in the summer of, November 22nd of 1997, 25 years ago, a little over now. I signed up on the dotted line to become a member of the National Guard, Iowa National Guard, and then later that summer '98 is when I went to a few drills, and then I went to basic and advanced individual training for to be an infantryman down at Fort Benning, Georgia. Delta 150 was my company. I was a Delta Dragon. I don't know why I remember, but whatever. Let me see if I can remember the motto. Delta Dragons, men are we, Airborne Ranger Infantry. Breathe fire, we breathe gas. We breathe fire, something you can guess. Up your. So that was my experience down at Fort Benning, Georgia. Fantastic, good discipline. But I was already in college, so I was different than most of the folks. I think was it
Mm-hmm.
98? Yeah, I was in college, so most of those folks that were a little younger than me, a few years younger. But it was a great experience. And then after that, I came back and joined ROTC. And then as
Mm-hmm.
I was a cadet in ROTC, I was in the Iowa National Guard in Waterloo, Iowa. First of the
Mm-hmm.
133 Infantry Battalion, part of, was it 2nd Brigade, 42nd? No, was it 34th Infantry Division, the Red Bull Division in the National Guard. And after that, as I finished up, I commissioned into the intelligence field. And then fast forward 25 years later, I picked up, I became an intel officer, tactical, operational, strategic, did counterintelligence, human intelligence, analysis. And then leadership positions that I had were as a detachment commander in the special forces, company commander. And then after I basically said, I'm not going to bend a knee and not participate in these unconstitutional forced manipulated, by the FBI, along with the Chinese Communist Party surrogates, one at the White House, and then directing the fake Secretary of Defense to mutilate our bodies through these illegal emergency use authorized products. I just decided that I'm not going to participate in that, not going to bend a knee. And I ended up retiring last year, even though I was selected to be a battalion commander. I was like, no, I'm not going to participate. That just it
Oh,
goes
wow.
beyond my moral, ethical, and legal principles. And I think I need to get out in order to be able to push back as a voice externally,
Yep.
unfettered, with unlimited First Amendment to be able to expose this corruption. That's how I landed on Tucker Carlson. We did an hour, and I explained the
Hmm.
mutilation, promotion, training by this lawless, illegitimate executive branch, destroying the readiness of our military at the DoD. I mean, we probably lost 60 to 80,000 of the top, not only physically, mentally critical thinkers in the force that saw it for what it was. And yeah, those are 80,000 leaders that were just pushed out.
Hmm.
And I always look at things as an opportunity. While those 60 to 80,000 made our national security, weakened it massively to create opportunities, greater opportunities for the Chinese Communist Party and Russia and Iran. Those 60 to 80,000 need to really consider going ahead and doing what I'm recommending. We need to take over the entire political apparatus from county all the way up. And it's going to start county all the way up, both political parties,
Yep.
because those are the people you want in there.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
that's how we're
For
going to
sure.
claw back
Uh,
and literally create a foundation that it's going to be unwavering, that's going to be able to totally decimate the commies externally, internally, and then have the demand and desire to absolutely, using somebody's words, obliterate and castrate the deep state at all levels.
I love it. I love it. As a intelligence officer, what are the qualities that a man or woman has to make them a really successful intelligence officer? Like, what do you think? You've known a lot of them over the years, I'm sure. Like, what's the main common denominator that you see with them?
I would say, great question. I have never been asked that. I would say that for me, I want somebody to always question the prevailing
Yep.
narrative and hypothesis. That comes with the territory of being a critical thinker. You
Hmm.
always have to look at it. This is should be always the case. Always come up with alternative ideas to
Hmm.
explain something. Because when you do that, it's called the first thing you got to do is hypothesis generation. So you have a question in mind, right? And you're like, how do I explain that? What's the answer to this particular question? And when you don't have the full evidence, you have to come up with different
Yep.
hypotheses or different ideas or theories, right? The
Yep.
more theories you can place in the collective and then be able to pull evidence to start to then refute a piece of evidence or, excuse me, a hypothesis, just by virtue of going through that process, you now have the collective potentially of what has occurred so that when you're starting to see things and indicators, you can automatically say and start to put it and apply it towards a hypothesis. We call it like analysis of competing hypotheses. But I
Hmm.
think the default needs to be you're focused on disproving
Yep.
what people think to be true. And when you exhaust your resources and everything that where you can't disprove it, then the chances that is the answer increases,
Hmm.
and that starts to mitigate your biases. And you got to understand. I mean, people need to understand where their biases are. My biases are, you can tell what I look like, my background, my military. Like I get it. Everyone has bias. I have bias, but the way you mitigate that is you're constantly consuming information
Hmm.
across all spectrums, and you need to apply necessary credibility to each piece of information. Because if you just take a piece of information as it is, you're going to get duped. You always have to be critical. So, in
Yeah.
summary,
I was having.
be critical of everything. Like this video right here, I don't know if somebody's interposing themselves in here and creating a deep fake of our conversation, but if I know that that's a potential, then we can keep that in the back of our minds, right? Because what's to say Zoom
Hmm.
is not manipulating what I'm telling you, and by the time you hear it, I'm calling you names and basically being disrespectful to you, because the computing power is there to do that.
Yep.
That's why
Yep.
having in-person conversations, you can't beat that. That's why they had to shut everything down and manipulate the whole country into believing that it was the most safe and secure election ever in the history of humanity, right? Never before has the human race seen and observed such a pristine election.
It's God, like when we went to the
The election
primaries
fraud
in
deniers.
Kentucky, mailing home ballots. I, my neighbor asked me about it. I said, it's going to be a bad deal either way. You know, it's the outcome has already been determined. And she didn't know what I meant by that, but it's clear as fucking day to me right now.
All right, so selection. Let's close off.
Yeah. So what's the selection process look like for Green Berets? Like how do you get in? Like what do you have to do qualifications wise to present yourself to be able to get through that gauntlet?
Yeah, so as a enlisted person, you got to be a specialist E4 or E5. I think with a waiver E4, E5, you have to go through a vetting process. Basically, you apply on paper,
Hmm.
and then a certain number of people are actually invited to go to the interview. The interview is when I went through, and most of the time it's about 3 weeks long. If you want to see some details behind it, there's a Discovery Channel episode by the name of Surviving the Cut that came out,
Okay.
and one of them was 2 weeks in hell. So at that moment in time, they change it every once in a while. It was 2 week interview, and when I say 2 or 3 week interview, it's a 24/7 interview, meaning
Hmm.
you're assessed on your physical, mental decision making process, and essentially how you act with others when basically no one's watching, when everyone's watching, and
Yep.
how you
Yep.
interact when you're under massive amounts of stress, sleep, physical, and so as part of that is a rating scheme. So you have a peer evaluation. So usually,
Hmm.
some people, well, many people just quit because they would just physically. In order to get in, you have to score a certain amount on your physical fitness test, and then once you're there, that's part of the application process. And if you're on the lower spectrum of it, it'll be more difficult for you to finish the physical tasks. But having said that, it's not only that, it's the mental resilience, right? Physical stamina, mental resilience. So if you're in pain and you just don't like to deal with pain and stress, well, then you're going to quit.
Yep.
And
Yep.
we don't want people to quit when no one's watching and you're assigned a mission where it's literally you and, 11 other guys that are relying on each other in order to be able to do what? Do unconventional warfare,
Hmm.
which is go into another country, link up with an indigenous force, train, advise, and equip them in their language to give them a capability to go ahead and overthrow the government that is not friendly to the United States so that those that you link up with then take over that government, which will
Hmm.
be friendly to the United States to be able to stabilize a region of the world. That's basically what the main mission is of a Green Beret,
Hmm.
unconventional warfare. And this is based off of Wikipedia. So the the mindset mentality of like never quit attitude is really the main component. And to differentiate the process, the interview process for say a Green Beret from some of the other ones, I know everybody's heard of the SEALs and then the subsequent training for each. I mean, that's the big difference. So as a Green Beret, you're learning another language, culture, and you're essentially there to train, advise, and equip another element to get to a level to be able to essentially run a country. So think of all the different nuances and components to that.
That's a lot. God, that's a lot, man. So in that selection process, is it more difficult to manage yourself or manage your expectations for other people that are trying to get through this process with you? Like, were you ever let down? Were you like, this is the guy that's going to come into battle with me and
So
he didn't make it?
I think the true characteristics of it, remember, you go in there with the same equipment, with the same
Hmm.
everything. Um, the key components to being successful on any team, like I just talked about before, is
Yeah.
action, action, action for leadership. So there's always going to be people that are better than you in some areas
Hmm.
and worse than you in others. If you can position yourself to be always giving more than you're taking, that all, and then doing it in a way that's classy without embarrassing those that need your help,
Hmm. It's
you
beautiful.
pretty much set yourself apart as a leader, because you go in there in a selection process without your rank, without your name, nothing. People
Okay.
don't know what you are, right? So you go in there, it's about performance. So you got to perform physically. And then when there's downtime, for example, you're prepping for the next event. If your stuff's in order, you're organized, you're ready to go, and you're just sitting there chilling, relaxing, watching everybody else struggling through, well, people see that. People are like, man, this guy knows what he's doing. And some of these younger guys don't really know what they're doing, and you're not even helping.
Hmm.
That's going to be indicated in your peer eval, and the likelihood of you being selected to go on to training is low because your peers are going to essentially make it known where they don't want you on that team.
Yep.
On the contrary, if you're if you take care of your stuff immediately first and you're the first one to start helping other guys out, be like, hey man, this is a trick that I use. Maybe you should consider this, like tying down your equipment here. This makes it
Hmm.
more efficient. This your backpack. If you put the weight over here, I mean, just little nuances of tactical movements, etc. The stuff that you do know, please share that with others. And even if you're like you're not good at something, be like, hey man, what can I help with? It's all
Yep.
about what you're doing when you can. And even like if people will see when you're hurt and struggling, but if you're still trying to help others, remember, you don't have more money, you don't have more
Hmm.
anything. It's literally your actions are decided in those 3 weeks based on the what you say and what you do, and your peers are going to evaluate you accordingly. Now, as I said on like when I was on Tucker's, I was I'm not the best thing since sliced bread. I'm barely above the worst thing since sliced bread. But luckily, in that process, with that feedback loop and the critique of others, if you're receptive to critique, especially if it's coming from 2 or 3 different people, you might want to start auto correcting.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're not going to be successful on a team. And so that's the key there is to try to, provide as much value to others without really
Hmm.
shaming them, right? Making them feel like they're less than your capability. Because when you do that, it's tacky, right? And no
Hmm.
one wants. But if you do it in a cordial, professional manner,
Sounds to me like it's an accelerated learning process for what you learn as like a 35-year-old man. At least that's the case for me. Like you learn that the less you say sometimes, but the more you do, it's probably better.
yeah, because people have senses just like you,
Hmm.
just by doing.
I think that's
So
awesome. Very
I
cool.
find
I'm not gonna.
myself talking more now than I do have ever have because I guess now that I'm a little older, I have a little more
Yeah,
experience. I
you
can
get some
share that.
wisdom to impart to people, and that's kind of the beauty of hindsight of things is you listen more when you're younger, and then you
But
can
the
get
beauty of
those
that
lessons out.
environment is, and this applies to any organization, I think, you can get more out of people if you understand what their personal and professional motivations are.
Hmm.
And everybody like reacts differently. I mean, I got one kid that reacts to positive reinforcement, and the
Yep.
other guy, if I critique him, it basically shuts down.
Yeah.
One of my
Yeah.
other kids, if I basically say, "Dude, you suck," you're the like, "Dude, you need to just you're like the worst this and that. You need to step up your game." He actually responds like, "Oh yeah, let me show you."
Uh huh.
So you got to know the range
Yep.
of who you're
Yep.
communicating with, because one person, the way you talk to them, will actually challenge you and say, "All right, I got you," and
Hmm.
another person will completely shut down. And what does that do? It's like you're not accomplishing what you need to do.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you got to be very, nuanced with the different people that are around you, especially you're on the same team. But sometimes also, we like you were talking about the weakness mentality and the corrupt mentality. There are times when you just have to, give that proverbial backhand to the face,
Yep.
body check to say, that's enough. Because obviously the people around them were either too scared to do that or their parents didn't do it enough.
Yep.
And so, like I mentioned with Governor Sununu, I want him to give me an opportunity for him to try to bully me. I long for that opportunity in person for him to attempt to bully me.
I love
What's that phrase? FAFO.
it. Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So I call on him to accept my challenge for a charity event, July 17th in New Hampshire. Anytime that day before 7, I think it is 6 p.m. any place, anytime in New Hampshire, you decide, sir. And let's do it to benefit the charity of your choice. Should you win, I mean, there have been fluke accidents. I get it, happened before. And then I will name my charity of choice and my cause of choice after the consequences that you're going to face.
I love
Should
it,
I?
man.
Should I win?
I love it. Well, if you don't mind, tell people where they can find you, more about you on social media or whatnot.
Yeah. So for now, under Twitter 2.0, if they continue to allow me to exercise my First Amendment and free speech, I'll reciprocate and produce content on there. The moment that I sense that is no longer the case, I'm going to cancel you immediately. I'm done with you. So just keep that in mind. But other than Twitter 2.0, I'm on, by the way, it's just my last name. Raiklin is one account that is shadow banned because that was my first one. But the one that I'm more active on is Ivan Raiklin. And then I'm across, I'll just go through the list: Truth Social, Telegram, Rumble. I do a daily show from 4 to 4:30, basically an update on where I think we need to apply the most pressure to get our country back in line. And a lot of it has to do with this 118th Congress, as well as some of the state legislatures throughout the country. And that's how we're going to be able to claw things back by doing that in person admonishment. Somebody has to come up and say, hey, man, you're not doing the right thing. And I'm just going to keep applying the necessary pressure to educate as many people as possible to make you so uncomfortable that you're going to essentially be guided into doing the right thing.
Absolutely, man. That's the name of the game is action. God bless you, brother. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah.
And
appreciate you reaching out.
hey, thank you so much. And I got a kid yelling at me right now. I got my 4-year-old coming down the stairs right now, so we're right on time.
Same here. All right, brother.
Thank you very much.
All right. See you, Jeff.
Bye-bye.